Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Feels Dropbox. If you're new here, I'm Lauren Cheng. I am an artist, content creator, just your regular person living in New York, and I'm in my 30s. I'm single, just figuring out life. And, you know, I didn't know I was going to have a podcast, but I guess we are here. So, for those of you who don't know, I created the Feels Dropbox because since I started creating content and sharing my story, a lot of people have been messaging me and sharing their stories with me. And I felt really honored to hear those stories, but I also wanted to create a space where we could all talk about it and talk about these things that we all struggle through together. Because at the end of the day, we are all just humans doing human things. And I think it's fascinating sometimes that we forget that the person next to us is struggling with something maybe very similar to us, but we just forget because we get so caught up in what we're doing. There's a lot less spaces for open and honest sharing. And I just wanted to be able to create this little corner of the internet where it felt like a cozy little hangout with your friends, but just be open to the idea that maybe the things that you're going through aren't entirely too different from anyone else around you. We are truly not alone in whatever we're going through. And this is what I'm learning over and over again. The more I hear these stories, the more I share these stories. So this space is a space to just be honest and non-judgmental. And if you feel like you want to share your story in the future, the information and everything and how to share it will be in the description box or in the show notes because this is now a podcast. Can I touch on that for just a quick second? Because I have always been a little bit adamant about not starting a podcast because I do think there are so many podcasts in the world. But I did start this series just because I felt like I wanted to help people and give people a space to share their story. And that just kind of snowballed into this thing of getting all these submissions from people and then wanting to honor those stories very honestly. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was through YouTube. And when I created those videos on YouTube, I just thought, okay, like it'll be a nice space for me to share that on this one platform. And I didn't know that you could just post things onto Spotify too. So I have unintentionally started a podcast in this way. And it is honestly quite exciting because this just goes to show you again that you really don't need to have everything and absolutely everything to be perfect before you start something. I am still figuring this out. I'm still trying to figure out audio. Like, I don't think this little tiny mic that I'm using, if you're on YouTube and watching, this little tiny mic is a DJI Mic Mini. And I think it's great for vlogging and stuff, but I don't know if it works for audio if you're actually listening to this on a podcast. So I'm still working the kinks out, but the one thing that I have noticed in everything that I've been doing and trying this year is that you can't be fully ready before you start something. And honestly, a lot of the times, starting before you're ready is when you're going to be able to make movements, right? Like if you just sit there and daydream and try to strategize and try to optimize absolutely every single thing before you even start the project that you want to do, you might not even ever get to starting. Because at a certain point, you'll convince yourself out of doing something because of fear, because of practicalities. And sometimes these little big dreams that we have may not seem practical, but if you don't start, how would you ever know, right? If you are wondering, that is how this podcast has started. But I really do hope you enjoy this space that I've created and that this helps in any sort of way for you to feel like you're not alone in any of your struggles. And if you do want to share your advice or leave a comment for any of the posters or people who have submitted their stories, please feel free to share it in the comments. But remember, as always, be kind and have grace for people. And truly, 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 this is a space for no judgment. There is no need to tell someone how to live their life because their life is theirs and yours is yours. So let's all remember to be really intentional with our words. And if you want to share a story because you feel like you relate to it, please feel free because I think it helps a lot of people to know that they're not alone in a lot of the things that they're going through. So without further ado, today I'm going to cover these two stories that I've gotten. Thank you for sharing your stories, by the way, if you have already sent them to me. I love reading them and I love being able to share them in this way. I know it takes guts to share sometimes, and props to you for doing that. We have two submissions today, and both of them touch upon connections that change as you grow. And I thought it was interesting that these two came in at around the same time, actually. But these two people have talked about how their connections and relationships have changed, but in very different ways. So Here we go. So the first story is from Joe. I used to be the type of person that got crushes on other people. I'm talking full on see a person I find attractive, have a few good hangouts, and the next thing I know, I'm planning the rest of our lives together. I understand what that means. I also feel that, by the way. However, I think something changed in me this summer. It was a couple weeks after I found out this girl I was really into had a boyfriend. And while I was down in the dumps, I started subletting a room in an apartment in New York for my internship. In this massive place where people are constantly on the move, always going somewhere and doing something, it feels a lot more futile and immature to get hung up on individual people. I have vibed with a bunch of different people this summer, but it seems like most people here come and go as they please, and it's harder to come by a connection, be it romantic or platonic, that feels like it's going to last. I don't think that is bad per se. I have been investing more energy into self care, self improvement, and showing more love and gratitude to my friends and family. Living in New York has made me a lot more comfortable in my own company, and while it can get lonely at times, I also feel a stronger sense of community and purpose here than ever before, as I imagine many other people going through the same things as I am who want to make it as badly as I do. I'll most likely be living here next summer too after I graduate college. Frankly, I just wonder what type of person I'm going to be in the next few years of my life. The part of me that seeks connection will never go away, but I think I will try to love more freely whilst keeping in mind that I am the only one that can truly make me happy. I'm scared and excited all at once, as it feels like one chapter of my life is coming to an end, and a new one with all sorts of opportunities begins. Wow! Thanks for sharing that, Joe. I relate so much to this story, especially as someone who's a single, also living in New York. Like, New York is one of those places where it is, and you know, I'm going to hate myself a little bit for saying this because, but it's true. It is something about the energy here. I am addicted to this place. I love New York so much, but I also find it incredibly lonely at times. And it is also one of those places where you can just look outside and you just feel like everybody is just doing their thing. Everyone's hustling, everyone's going around, and it can feel so invigorating and so quiet at the same time. It is truly a magical city. I think everybody who comes here has a big dream and wants to find their people, wants to find their community, because it is also one of those places where you can have the most niche interest. For example, I don't know, maybe you like rollerblading while crocheting or something like that. You will find somebody in a group that can do that. And it is a very, very bizarre phenomenon that can happen here. But I have found that even while I change as a human being, and my interests have changed drastically in the last 3 years, but even within every single transition I've gone through personally, I've been able to find other people who relate to that and who enjoy the same things that I enjoy. So New York, I get it. I totally get it. New York is a beautiful city, full of people, full of dreams, and it can be incredibly lonely at the same time. I also want to say I really love that you're recognizing the change that you see in yourself, because I think that's part of real growth is when you can kind of look back at your life and notice the patterns, notice the changes, and see how you've grown. And I do this practice a lot, and I hope this helps anyone else put things into perspective too. Sometimes when I get really caught up in the mundane things and the mundane stresses of every single day, I'll go back into my phone and look at a photo from literally 1 year ago on that day. And I'll just look at that person who existed a year ago, the me that existed a year ago. And it amazes me how much can change in just a short amount of time. Like 1 year can feel really, really short, but a lot can happen within that year. And recognizing the shifts that have changed in you and in the people around you is so key to understanding yourself and where you want to grow more and who you want to become, right? Like you can look back on your life and notice where you kind of felt like maybe you were disconnected with yourself or with other people, and you can try to understand what's happening there. And when you do, it really helps you put things into perspective of where you want to be leaning towards going forward. I know Joe's not asking for any advice in this story, but it was also just such a relatable story to share that it is something that we have to grow through as we get older, that your friendships will shift, and even how you love and how you like people shifts a lot too. I think when I was in my early 20s or even late 20s, the way I loved people changed so much. over time. I used to be that person too. And I still think sometimes there is a version of me on the inside that will see someone hang out with someone twice and be like, oh my gosh, wait, are you my husband? I'll hang out with them like a couple more times and be like, no, he's not. But it's fascinating that I think the human body almost wants to feel giddy and wants to find love. And I think that goes to show you how much connection is important to everybody. We do live in a society where it can feel like everyone's sequestered into their own little circles or into their own little groups. And even though we have social media to connect all of us, we are in an incredibly disconnected society. There's so many differences between people that we use as excuses not to connect with people. And I'm also not someone who is completely immune to that either. I don't think it's necessarily an individualistic problem, but it is something that we are all required to be very mindful of as we move forward and how we want to connect with people more. Because I think there is a difference between wanting to connect with people and then having your boundaries. Because for a lot of people, if you kind of spread yourself too thin and you allow yourself to connect with everybody, you kind of lose yourself along the way because you don't take the time to be by yourself, which is exactly what Joe is saying here, right? There's a lot we can get out of also just being by ourselves and being with ourselves and taking that time to process and reflect and also just understanding ourselves, right? This is why I go on so many solo dates. And I think I would continue to go on solo dates regardless of if I'm single or not, because it is a time that I truly treasure spending with myself. I think it takes someone with a lot of emotional strength and maturity to be able to sit by yourself and not care what other people think. Some people message me sometimes and ask me, oh, don't you get worried that people will judge you if you're sitting by yourself? And I've done this for so long and spent so much time with myself that I forget that that was a fear that I used to have. I used to fear being seen as a quote unquote loser if I'm hanging out by myself, or like, oh, she has no friends. I used to be so insecure about seeming like I didn't have friends that I would try to surround myself with so many people who maybe didn't even see me as a friend, but I just wanted to make it seem like I had a lot of friends, right? So I think as you get older, you definitely get into the space of treasuring your time alone, but also treasuring very high quality friendships. And New York is one of those places where it is harder to find those sometimes. There's a lot of people, and as you get older, it is harder and harder to find people that you can fully dive really deep into with those friendships that perhaps isn't the same as the friendships you had growing up when you went to the same schools and you saw each other every single day. I used to get a bit sad, like, oh, I don't know why I don't have any close friends in New York. But I realized it's because I was seeing friendships very differently. I might not have friends in the same way that my old friends are, right? I don't really have friends in New York where it feels like my childhood best friend is around, where we can just sit on a chair and do nothing all day. But that doesn't make my new friendships in New York any less important. They're just different. And that is very normal and very indicative of how priorities shift as you get older. But that doesn't mean that the love isn't there. I care about my friends in New York a lot. I take the time to get to know them. I take the time to spend time with them. And it's funny that when you get into your 30s, when you get older, that you'll start laughing with your friends. Like, if I see someone once a month, that is a very consistent and good cadence for seeing someone. And one of my best friends in New York, I've been friends with her since I was 14. I see her once, maybe every 2 months. But the whole point is, it's not about how often you see them. It's about how you feel when you're with them. When I'm with her, it just feels like everything is the same, right? Like nothing has changed because we are who we are. And we just bring all our experiences to where we are at that moment. And I think that's what makes a really great friendship, is that even when you're apart, it doesn't feel like anything has shifted because you just know that you guys are there for each other and you're here for them to see how they're growing as humans, and they're here for you to see how you're growing and changing and shifting. And that is the sign of a true connection, I think, when you can accept the person for who they are in whatever moment they're shifting in and just appreciate them for who they are. So, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really hope you enjoy your time in New York and just acknowledge the growth that you've had. and will continue to have over time. This is one of those places where it is so strange and so magical that things can shift so quickly and you won't even be able to take a breath to look at how much has changed until you just take a beat and look back and be like, whoa, what has happened in the last year? And I hope you remember to do that as you spend more time in New York. Like, it is very easy to get jaded in this city. I think I've met a lot of people who have been here for 10 years and they just do the ins and outs every single day and they just have the same routine over and over again and have the same friends and just get a bit cynical about the city. But if you remain on the side of just trusting that huge changes could come within yourself and externally in your life as well, if you remain open to it, this place can be a place that will bring you maybe some of your closest friends you've ever had or some of the craziest experiences you'll ever go through. I love New York. I really love it. I want to be one of those people who says New York or nowhere, but right now I'm New York or nowhere. I don't know if I could live here forever, but it really is a very amazing place. So, Joe, I hope you really enjoy your time here after you come back from college and also enjoy college. You know, like college is also a time of really great discovery. And what I would give to be in my early 20s and be able to experience New York and college all over again. I hope you remain present to all the changes that are happening. And as much as you want to work hard and hustle and make it, which, you know, I have no doubt you could if you wanted to. With all that being said, though, take some time to be present and enjoy where you are right now, even if you haven't figured it all out yet, because truly that is the journey, and enjoying the process throughout the journey is so much more of it than we actually give credit for. I think that's the best part. When you get scared and excited at the same time, then you know you're going the right direction. But anyways, for anyone else who relates to that story or is thinking of moving to New York or worried about moving to New York or learning about how to be comfortable in your own company and comfortable in your own skin, and also seeing how your friendships shift and change over time. I hope this story lets you know that you are not alone in that. And a lot of us go through that. Life can really harden you over time. It is very easy to say no to things and shut down and be like, I don't want to participate in things that make me nervous, because we do get really complacent over time. But as long as you remember to remain open and say yes to the universe and let the universe and the world surprise you, you will be shocked at what could happen in just a year, let alone 5 years. Okay, let's get into story number 2. Story number 2 is from Shar. Shar, thank you for sharing your story with us and also just sharing this insight with me, because I think it's something that I personally haven't gone through, but I think a lot of people would agree or have gone through something similar to you. So this is what Shar says. I wish more people were compassionate toward adult children who choose not to have a relationship with their parents. I ended my relationship with my mom 5 years ago. To me, relationships should be mutual and healthy. Being family alone isn't a good enough reason to keep a toxic narcissistic dynamic going. Instead of judging, people should be curious and ask, what did the parent do that drove the child away as an adult? Can I be very honest? I got a little sad when I read this, because personally, my relationship with my parents is relatively good. I am very blessed in that, and I know that I have a lot of friends also who struggle with their relationships with their parents, especially narcissistic parents. I think that is something that is now more coming to light, because I think the term narcissism wasn't as around many years ago. Now it does get thrown around a lot, but that's also another thing that I want to touch on later. But I wanted to share this story with you guys because it allowed me to also see something that perhaps I personally have biases towards too, right? Like, my first instinct when I read the story was, oh, like, I hope she does rekindle with her mom, because that would be something that I initially would want to say. But I also had to take a moment to step back out of my shoes and put myself into your shoes and think to myself, yes, what happened there? You know, like, what did her mom do to drive her away? I don't think relationships are easy. Relationships are definitely two-way streets. And when there's one person who isn't able to participate in a healthy, mutual loving relationship in that way, I do think it's strong and takes a lot of courage to walk away from that, especially if it's someone like your mom or the quote unquote family that you're born into, right? And I think that's what a lot of my friends talk about when they say they have a chosen family now. Family is very important, regardless if it's chosen or the one that you're born into. In Asian culture, it is very often talked about that, you respect your elders and your family. And I do think for me personally, my family values have been grown out of that, right? I come from a very traditional Chinese family, and I am very grateful that I've been in that family and we have a relatively close-knit family in that way. But of course, there are always family dynamics that are very difficult. And we personally have also gone through our ups and downs as a family too. And I am blessed to say that my parents have worked through a lot of that with me and were willing and open, and also give me grace too for a lot of the things that we had to go through as parent and child, and also between me and my siblings, and even between me and my aunts and uncles. Especially if you have a big family, that's a lot of individuals, and a lot of individuals with all their own hurts that all have to interact with each other. It is often hard enough to have one singular relationship be entirely healthy, and imagine that in a lot bigger sense. And I'm sure in a lot of families there are a lot of toxic dynamics that are happening, mostly because people are hurt, right? And we can't say or point fingers where the hurt is coming from. A lot of the times the hurt and traumas that we're going through happened to us when we were very, very young. And we also have to remember that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents were also human children at some point, right? They have also gone through their own traumas in their own time. And because sometimes we see them as quote-unquote adults, they should have these things figured out. But it is so important to remember that your parents and your grandparents, anyone older than you, anybody in the world, is just living their life for the first time just as much as you are. So just because someone is older than you doesn't mean they have it more figured out. Just because someone's older than you doesn't mean that they are technically wiser. Just because they're older than you doesn't mean that they're smarter than you. Age is just a number of how long you've been on this earth. It is not the same as how much work you've put into yourself, how much internal work you've done to heal yourselves. It has no bearing on that at all. So something I wanted to touch upon with Shar was that it does take someone very strong to be like, hey, I'm noticing a very unhealthy dynamic here, and I choose to walk away from this. I choose to have my boundaries, and I choose to keep my peace and be able to make sure that this connection with myself is the priority, and not to let yourself down just because someone who is older than you or someone who you have to be in a relationship with is hurting you. I guess one thing I'm really learning from Jar is also that it is sometimes okay to let go. And I don't really know the rest of your story. I don't know what happened, and I can't say and I can't judge any of that. But I'm not promoting cutting things off with all parents. If you have a fight with your parent, or if you just have a fight with your sister and you just want to cut things off, I don't think cutting people off prematurely is the way to go. That's also toxic in its own way. But Shar, I'm sure you've thought about everything and really taken things into consideration before doing something like that, because that is something that cannot be taken lightly. I think one thing that I'm really seeing that is a similarity in both of these stories is that one person is trying to learn to not hold too tightly to connections, and one person is learning that it's okay to let go completely sometimes. And in both of these cases, there is the thread of trusting yourself, right? I think that is the most important part of all of it, is trusting yourself to decide what's right for you and not what anyone else is telling you. Because a lot of times, even when it's uncomfortable, scary, or that you feel like you'll be misunderstood, the most important thing in all of that is that you understand yourself. You understand why you've made certain decisions, and not to make those decisions lightly either. I think every single thing we do has a consequence. Every single decision we make has an effect on someone else or something else, or even yourself. So living life intentionally and trying to understand to the very, very core of what you're asking for from yourself and from other people is very important to building strong and healthy connections. to yourself or to other people. So just wanted to say thank you, Shar, for sharing your story. And if you relate to Shar in any sort of way, please feel free to leave it in the comments. And even though I personally don't have any experience with that, I can understand it from your point of view too. And that really is a very personal decision, like it's something that I'm sure came with a lot of hurt and heaviness. And I hope that one day, perhaps maybe your mom will understand and see your point of view. And I hope that one day you'll be able to find healing within that for yourself too. Not in a way that you have to reconnect with her, but just in a way that it won't feel like it's too heavy or hurting you anymore. Thank you both for sharing your stories. I really appreciate you taking the time to write these stories and sharing about how relationships are hard. Like platonic or romantic or whatever relationships, any sort of interaction you have when you're building a relationship with someone can be really difficult because a lot of us go through so many nuances and insecurities and hurts and pains and baggage that we all carry. And the older you get, the more baggage you kind of carry with you. And I don't love the term baggage all the time just because it feels like it's always really heavy. I think it's not always heavy. Sometimes you learn things about yourself that make you have stronger boundaries, and those stronger boundaries seem like baggage to some people, but it actually is some way to indicate to yourself that you trust yourself and that you know what you need to do to remain healthy for you and to keep the peace for you. So I don't love the word baggage, but I do say that the older I get, the smaller my circle becomes, only because I'm very careful about the energy that's in my life now. I don't want to just be friends with anyone just for the sake of being friends. There's plenty of people in the world who can be acquaintances with so many people. I meet so many people all the time in New York, and it's one of the beauties of New York. You meet people all the time. But I'm also very careful who I spend my time with. You only have 24 hours in a day, and you only have 52 weeks in a year. And within all of that time, it is very important who you keep within your circle and who you keep close to you. Because it is true what they say. The 5 closest people to you are very much a reflection of who you are and who you want to become. And the more I spend time with myself, the more I love myself, the more confidence I have in myself, the less time I have for people who want to spend time in victim mode or negative mode. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that as if I'm better than anybody. I definitely was one of those people who used to very much live in victim mode, and I blamed everyone else for everything. I do think my depression was a result of my own actions. I didn't trust myself. I didn't put in the work to be able to trust myself. I woke up every single day and I would blame everyone else for everything, and I was living in this mentality that the world was out to get me. And when you live in that mentality and you live on that frequency, you attract that stuff in. And I do think my friends at that point, not that they're bad people, but we would all just sit around complaining all the time. That was what we had in common, right? We'd complain about how awful life was or how we don't like this and we don't like that. And that energy, while can bring people together, because a lot of the times when you have a common enemy, that is how you bring people together. But I do think there was a certain point I looked at that kind of energy and I just thought to myself, it's not helping me. It is not helping me become who I want to become. It is very much something that is keeping me small and keeping me living in this mindset that I can't do anything because I am not able to. And once I started spending a lot more time with myself and really having a good hard look at myself in the mirror and thinking, what am I doing to contribute to the toxicity that's in my life? Because that's all it is. Every single toxic relationship you see in your life is a result of what is happening within. And once I learned that, it was a shift, let me tell you. I had to do a lot of hard, tough work and looking very much at my own insecurities dead on and try to work through those things and put my ego down and say, what can I do to make my relationship with me better so that my relationships with everybody else can also improve as well. And I'm also not saying that there aren't bad people out there. There are definitely people who are toxic and who will want to drag you down. The important part is to spend the time with yourself so that when those people do come into your orbit, you know what your boundaries are, you know what you want to say no to and what you invite into your life. And I am grateful that I'm learning all these lessons in my early 30s. And even though there are a lot of people in their 20s who fear turning 30 and not learning all these lessons or feeling like they're still figuring it out, I just have to remind you, 30s is still relatively young, you know? We're still figuring things out, and we will continue to be figuring things out all along the way. And relationships are one of those things that you can't really learn how to master that code. That's not something we can perfect. Relationships and friendships and the nuances of connection are something that change over time. It changes along with how you change every single day. And it changes with the environment around you. It also is not something that is going to ever be the same. The person that you meet in that moment is a person that you meet only strictly within that moment of time and space. Those connections are very unique in and of itself. I do think every single person who comes into your life or crosses your path at some point does teach you a lesson, regardless of if it's a passing acquaintance or someone who really becomes a very strong presence in your life. Every single relationship can teach you something about yourself if you're willing to look at it and if you're willing to take the time to just appreciate them for what they are, but also just understand things about yourself as you move through this world. I've definitely had friendships in my early 20s that I was going to be friends with for the rest of my life. And there were also friends who I thought I had left in my teenage years that are still in my life and still really good friends now. It just is one of those things where you just never know how relationships are going to change. You really never know when people will come back into your life, and you don't know how people are going to change either. I've had friends who I thought were so strange when I was a teenager. And now we've come back into each other's lives in our orbit, and we laugh about it all the time. Like, we never would have been friends when we were teenagers. But now that we're in our 30s and we've become more comfortable in who we are, we can become really good friends. And I definitely have friends who I thought, you know, in my late 20s, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be my best friend for the rest of my life. We've shifted a lot too. And I've kind of stepped back from a lot of those relationships too, because they weren't as fulfilling as they used to be. And it doesn't mean that we're never going to be friends again. It's just that currently in the space where we are right now, it is healthier for both parties to just kind of take a back seat on our friendship and just let each other grow into who we are supposed to become. But this is what this space is for, really. This is exactly what this space is for us to share some of the more intricate things about life and difficulties of life that everybody does go through in some sort of way. It won't be the exact same situation for everybody, but it's all rooted in the same things of fear and love. So I hope if you're listening still or you're watching still that this helped in any sort of way. Just to remind you that you are not alone. We are not alone. We're all out here figuring this thing out together. And there's going to be so many ups and downs that we keep having to go through in life. No one has it figured out. And you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And you also never know who you're going to meet. So just remember that some of the people you haven't even met yet are going to be people that you love the most. So just remain open to life. Remain open to the possibilities of anything that could happen. And I hope that you continue to learn more about yourself and spend more time with yourself and prioritize the time with yourself so that all the relationships around you can also benefit too. If you're watching and listening, thank you for being here and taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to follow and like and subscribe and give me 5 stars, you know, do the whole thing. It really helps me to know that this is helping anyone in any sort of way. So please do all those things. It does help. And if you feel called to share your story or you want to ask for advice or anything like that, so just so you know, this is how it's going to be shared. And if you want to do so, the link will be in the description or in the show notes. And it will always be anonymous unless otherwise specified. So Joe and Shar today wanted to share their name with us, but you also don't have to do that if you don't want to. I think that will be it for today. That was a lot of yapping. My throat is very, very sore. And hopefully, if anyone can give me any advice on what mics to get and how to set up a proper audio space here, because I don't know if this audio is working, but let me know. You know, I want to make this as enjoyable of an experience for you as well. Okay. Anyways, I hope you guys have an amazing week ahead and that you just remember how unique and beautiful you are as a human being and that we are not alone. All right. Have a good day. Bye.